I had the good fortune and was lucky enough to be able to work with Orson Welles as his cameraman, assistant, right-hand man, etc. for 15 years, from the time I met him in 1970 until his death in 1985. My name is Gary Graver. Now, the story of how I came to meet Orson is very interesting. I had been making movies for about 2 or 3 years as a director of photography. Following that, I worked on such epics as Dracula versus Frankenstein, The Girls from Thunder Strip, Satan Sadist, etc. And I had seen and was very much influenced by Orson's movie, Touch of Evil. That was the first movie I saw of his. And it was like a roller coaster ride. I came out of the theater and I said to myself, my gosh, people can really make a movie like this? It's so exciting, so rich with imagination. I knew that if I ever met Orson Welles someday, that he and I would get along. I just felt the camaraderie would be there, and it was. So one day in 1970, near the 4th of July, I was at Schwab's drugstore in Hollywood, and I read in Variety that Orson Welles was in town at the Beverly Hills Hotel. I went back to the phone booth, called him up, and to my surprise, he answered the phone. Hello? I said, Orson Welles? Yes, who is this? I introduced myself, Gary Graver. I said, I'm an American cameraman, etc., etc. He says, well, I'm very busy. I'm on my way to the airport. He says, I've got to go to New York to make a picture. He took my number and he said, call me later. I said, okay, that's fine. That's pretty good. So I went home. I drove up Laurel Canyon to my house. As I pulled in my driveway, the phone was ringing. I ran into my house, picked up the phone. Gary, this is Orson. Get over to the Beverly Hills Hotel right away. I've got to talk to you. Wow. I was surprised and shocked. I got in my car, drove over to the Beverly Hills Hotel, and there he was. And I was extremely nervous meeting Orson. I was in awe, and I was impressed to be in his company. And we sat down and chatted for a while, and he said to me, he says, I have a great idea for a movie, and I would like to work with you. He said, you're the second cameraman that's called me up. Only 2 cameramen have ever called me up and said they wanted to work with me. The first one was Greg Toland on Citizen Kane. He says, now you. So it must mean good luck. He says, I'm going to go to New York and make a picture, and when I come back, we'll start some tests and make The Other Side of the Wind. And as we chatted along, all of a sudden, he grabbed me by the back of the neck and threw me down on the ground. And I was down there looking. And he was holding me, and I wondered what the hell was going on. It was very strange. And he leaned on me, he pushed me down, and said, shh, shh, shh. He said, shh, shh, don't make a noise. And he looked up, and he was looking out the window all around. I thought, what the hell have I gotten myself into here? What's going on? Here I was with Orson Welles, laying flat on the rug in his Beverly Hills bungalow, not knowing what the hell was going on. And then after a few minutes, he said, come on, get up. And we got up. I said, well, what was that? He said, out the window, he said, it's the actress, Ruth Gordon. If she saw me in here, she'd come in and talk. He said, I want to talk to you. So that was my first meeting with Orson. When Orson Welles came back from New York, he called me, and I began a series of tests, and I was very nervous about it. The tests, as you see here, are shots of Orson sitting in the Beverly Hills Hotel bungalow that he rented, and I was shooting him. And these tests were made with the beginning of a test to see for lighting and how he looked and everything, and what I could do if I was a cameraman. And then we proceeded to shoot The Other Side of the Wind. I just want to run you down the cast list of who eventually ended up on the other side of the wind. John Huston, Peter Bogdanovich, Oya Kodar, Robert Random, Lily Palmer, Edmund O'Brien, Cameron Mitchell, Mercedes McCambridge, Norman Foster, Dennis Hopper, Paul Stewart, Susan Strasberg, Tony O'Selwert, Claude Chabrol, Stefan Audran, Paul Mazursky, Henry Jaglom, George Jessel, John Carroll, Benny Rubin, Peter Jason, Gregory Sierra, Dan Tobin, and Curtis Harrington. Now we're talking to Peter Bogdanovich from another point of view of working with Orson as a writer. This book is by Orson and Peter Bogdanovich. We have versions here in the American version, the English version, and the French version. So Peter, what was it like working on the book?
Working with Orson, it was Orson having asked me to do the book. Then the struggle was to get Orson to do the book. because he didn't want to be interviewed and he didn't really want to talk about his movies and so on. But the whole point of the book was to set the record straight, to try to get all the legends, all the rumors, all the false stories told from Orson's point of view. I would transcribe the stuff, put it in the order that I thought would be interesting, and break it into sections, and then I'd send it to Orson, you know, chapter by chapter, and in a script, and then months would go by, and eventually it would come back, totally rewritten. Well, it's funny because I was going to make a picture called The Last Picture Show, and he read the script. He didn't like it much. He referred to it as the dirty picture. He liked the movie, but he didn't like the script, and said that I had not shot the script. He claimed that it was something else that I'd shot, wasn't the script. But anyway, and it had some sex in it and some stuff and so on. So at one point I remember talking to Orson, and I said, "What are you doing?" And talking on the phone. So, "I'm starting a movie. I'd like you to be in it." I said, "You're starting a movie? What movie?" He says, "It's a dirty movie. If you can make one, I can."
Orson would work on other people's movies, when necessary, to make money to further his own projects. Taking from the cinema, he put money back into the cinema, his own. Acting jobs provided seed money for us to start shooting The Other Side of the Wind. First, we started with tests of Oya Kodar. One of the actors Orson recruited to play in The Other Side of the Wind was a man that Orson had met many years before in New York, Cameron Mitchell.
I was a very poor would-be actor, and I worked, let's see, about 90-some hours a week in this horrible theater. You carried a 5-battery flashlight to fight off the strange people who tried to attack you. And it was between a burlesque house and another theater on 42nd Street that played like a triple bill, 10 cents admission for 3 horror films, you know. And I remember the coat that I had on was like a trench coat, you know. But I'd bought it in a secondhand store. It cost me 35 cents, which, you know, but it looked great, you know. You just strapped it in. I think my shoes I can't even go into that yet because they were so horrible. But they had what you call throwaway dickies then. It cost 15 cents, but mine wasn't a throwaway because I couldn't afford it, you know. But anyway, if you put the dickie on, and then you put the bow tie, as an usher, I was an usher in this theater, working, you know, like 30 hours a day. It was really very hard, $8 a week or $7 a week or whatever. And I had like 35 minutes for my dinner, and this was about, oh, I'd say 6:45 at night or something like that. And I always would fantasize. I thought, you know, the Rockefeller name was important, and I thought, well, I'd look like the son of Rockefeller. Everyone would think this is a dinner jacket underneath. It was an usher's outfit, you know, with stripes on the legs, but the trench coat hid the stripes. There's a big man looking at the posters, the stills from the horror films, and I recognize him. It's Orson Welles. And I go over because I think I look like a very young, affluent member of society. And he talks to me. We talked about the shows, the theater. I think it was Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi. And he's looking at me the way Orson could look directly at you, because that was one thing about Orson. It didn't matter what level of society you came from. If he looked at you, man, you were looked at. And he slowly goes down my figure with his eyes to my shoes. And I look at these terrible shoes, torn apart, holes everywhere. And all my dreams of being a young Rockefeller went out the window, and I left in absolute panic and shock. And I went across to Bickford's to get my 12-cent dinner. Anyway, years later, when I was doing High Chaparral in Arizona, I picked up the phone. There was a call from me without being, you know, protected. In this deep, rich voice, "Cameron?" I said, "Yeah." He He said, "This is Orson." I said, "Orson? The Orson?" He said, "This is Orson Welles. I died." He said, "I've been trying to reach you. I'm doing a film. I'd like you to play a part in the film." I said, "Yeah, sure, of course, anything, you know." And near the end of the shoot, he said, "Cameron," he said, well. I said, "What?" You know, anything Orson said was important. No, it's better left unsaid. I said, "No, Orson, what?" He said, "Did you ever get those shoes fixed?" He remembered it. He remembered it, and I was nothing, I was nobody, to show you what a strange, wonderful mind he had. No one would believe me, Gary, but you.
Shooting The Other Side of the Wind, here is Cameron Mitchell standing with Orson behind him, and I'm to the right, behind the camera.
It was only me in the bus with a bus full of mannequins, dummies. And
No, Mercedes McCambridge was there.
oh, Mercedes McCambridge, maybe
Paul Stewart.
Edmund O'Brien, maybe.
Yep.
But the shot was impossible to make the way Orson wanted to make it. Go through tunnels, bright daylight, terrible traffic, noise, horns blowing, dynamite going off. Anyway, the scene is over after almost a full roll of a film, right?
Right.
And Orson says, "How was it, Gary?" And Gary said, "Well, Orson, magnificent." Yes, Orson, right. But you see, we go through all the tunnels and the shadows, and I don't want to hear that. One word. Magnificent. Magnificent. And Gary said, "Well, okay, Orson, magnificent." And Orson said, "Can we use it?"
There came a time in the production of The Other Side of the Wind when we needed a production manager, and that duty fell to a newcomer in the movie business, now well known, Frank Marshall.
Well, I just finished a picture with Peter Bogdanovich, actually my first picture as an official location manager and member of a crew. I had met Peter and his wife Polly at a party in 1967, John Ford's house. And Peter had brought me along on his first picture, Targets, as sort of a director's assistant, and then I worked as location manager on his second movie, Last Picture Show. So when Orson knew Peter, I believe, very well in those days, and also knew Polly, and had asked Polly to come down to Arizona to be the production designer or build the sets or something. And I didn't have anything to do, and Polly asked me to come along as sort of driver gopher. So there I showed up in Carefree, Arizona, and I remember being very intimidated and very nervous about meeting Orson. And Polly sort of introduced me, and Orson said, "Well, who's this and what's he doing here?" And I was kind of cowering in the background, and Polly explained, "Well, he's good and he knows how to do a lot of things and he'll be a big help and he can, you know, help us on anything you want." And Orson sort of mumbled and went off, and for 2 days he never said a word to me. And I think actually you kind of said, "Go do this and go do that," and Polly. And I remember on the third day, he turned in the middle of something and said, "Frank, would you go do that?" And I about died because he knew my name. And I was his from then on, you know. It was just this great moment for me that he actually, you know, he believed in me then, and it was okay, so.
Another one of our actors and slash grip, caterer, driver, all-around guy is Peter Jason.
Let me just start off meeting him. That was a very important moment in my life. Frank Marshall, who was, I believe, loaned to Orson by Peter Bogdanovich to assist him on the making of The Other Side of the Wind, called me in New York. We grew up together. He called me and he said, "Peter, you want to be in a movie?" And I said, "Sure." You know, I was starving in New York, and he said, "Do you have to know any more about it?" And I said, "No." He said, "There's a ticket for you at Kennedy. You're flying to Phoenix. We'll pick you up at the airport. That's all you have to know, right?" I said, "That's all I have to know." And I figured I was flying to do some What's Up Doc 2 or something, you know, some Bogdanovich film. And so I got on the plane, I flew there, and I arrived at the airport, and there was, I believe it was Neil Canton. Let's see, the four of us, I think. Strange group. And I looked at the four of them, they didn't know where they were going either. And we all hopped in the car and we drove off to Cave Creek, Arizona. Came driving in under this house that was hanging on these boulders out in Cave Creek, Carefree area, and pulled in underneath this swimming pool that was like suspended. And then we went up these stairs and I walked in, still not knowing where I am or what I'm doing there. And I see Mercedes McCambridge, you know, and wow, that's, and then there's John Huston. My God, where am I, you know? And then I see Rich Little and some other people that I recognized, and Edmund O'Brien and Cameron Mitchell. I mean, my God, what am I in here? And so I see Frank finally. He comes over and says, "Peter, hi, have you met him yet?" And I said, "No." And I thought he was talking about Bogdanovich. And he said, "Well, go in the kitchen and have a T-bone." And everyone's eating now, and they're all having T-bones out there. So I went in the kitchen, I grabbed a T-bone, I put it on my plate, and I'm just about to eat it. And Frank says, "Peter." And yeah. And he says, "Come on over here, now." And I went, okay. I put the steak down, I walk over, and there was Orson Welles. And he walks over and he says, "Orson, I want you to meet Peter Jason from New York." And I went, "How do you do, Mr. Welles? Nice to meet you." And he looked right at me and he went, "Well, you don't look anything like anybody." Now, I didn't know what the hell that meant. I didn't know whether it meant he hated me and I'm getting on the plane and going back, or he loved me, or I didn't know what it meant. But it meant I didn't look anything like anybody, I guess. So he says, "Welcome to the family." And he stuck out his big old paw, and I grabbed it, you know, and because, I mean, that was Orson Welles. I worshiped this man, you know. And this is like a hero of everybody that I've ever wanted to be around. And he said, "I'll be with you in a moment." And he walked away, and then a couple of minutes later, I went back to my steak, which I still never got to eat. And then Orson says, "Get Peter out here by the pool." And I went out, I got up, and Frank gave me a script, and I went out by the pool, and here's John Huston in front of the camera, and I'm behind the camera holding the script, and Orson says, "Action." And Huston says his line. He's playing Jake Hannaford, this famous director, and he says, "Blah, blah, 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 blah." And I went, "Blah, blah, 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 blah." And he goes, "Cut. Peter, don't act. Just say the words." And I said, "Oh, sorry, Mr. Welles. Blah, 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 blah. Perfect. Action. Do it again." And that was my introduction to Orson. And
You get to eat the steak.
I never got to eat that steak, but I had many of them over the 6 months that I was in Cave Creek, Arizona, working on this picture. Well, actually, Orson was having me read the off-camera lines to Mr. Huston, who was doing his scene here in America, because he'd shot Lily Palmer, her half of the scene, over in Spain, I believe, and I was playing Lily Palmer.
One of my most favorite things of being with him and working with him was he was always a challenge. There was never anything that was the same. You might get a page of dialogue and an hour later it'd be different, or he'd say, "Well, we're going to shoot this and you're going to switch the dialogue off and you do this dialogue, and that person who's doing the dialogue did it 2 years ago in Paris." And you say, "Well, what are they saying and what are they looking at?" "Don't worry about it, it'll be fine. Just say this and do this and put that light up there." And so you're constantly having to ad-lib about things, and it was very exciting all the time working with him, because he would just change things in the moment's notice. You'd get a call at 4 in the morning in the hotel. "Okay, we're going to have a dawn shot. Get over here." "Well, what scene?" "I don't care. Just get over here. We'll find it." And you'd go out on the road, and he'd put something in. You didn't know what you were doing, but he did.
Before I did the film, I received this giant, heavy, thick script, which he changed as he went along. He shot the scenes, and there was a lot of the dialogue, hunks of the dialogue, but he would also, if he got a better idea, or even if you came up with something. I remember Huston coming up with new ideas, or Bogdanovich. And what he would also do, which I thought was terrific, is one day I would say a line, and then he'd say, no, it's not right for your character, and the next day somebody else would say the line. So if I had a line that I didn't like, I'd say, "Gee, Orson, wouldn't it be wonderful if Tonio said that line? It would give it another quality." And we'd say, "Oh, yes, you're right."
Orson was not egotistical in a way. It's my script. It's my movie. You got to do it my way. No, it was like, it's our movie. We're making a thing here, and let's make it. And anyone who wasn't working on that, it was like we'd all hide out behind Orson. Orson would sit here, you know, and Gary and Frank and Rick and Neil and myself, we'd all like hang around behind him because, number one, you weren't in his periphery, you weren't going to get yelled at. That was number one. And number two, we could also be watching everything he was watching at and try to get it before he saw it, you know, try to fix it before, like if that lamp had something hanging on it, you know, but every time I started to make a move for something, Orson would say, somebody get that last thing hang on the lamp. I was just on my way, you know, it's like he saw it just before you made your move.
For the party sequence in The Other Side of the Wind, Orson had several well-known directors playing themselves. Among them were Dennis Hopper, Paul Mazursky, and Curtis Harrington.
My first encounter with Orson was on the set of, or on the location of The Other Side of the Wind. Gary told me that they were shooting one night, and he told me where to go, but not to let myself be seen. So I climbed up this very steep hill, and I saw the lights up there, and as I got closer to the top of the hill, it was a very, very steep and precarious climb. I began to hear Orson's voice and hear him giving instructions and everything and directing, and it was very exciting for me to be in such a close presence of the master. And then something happened. I think the ground gave away under my foot or something, but I suddenly was revealed. And of course I was absolutely terrified that Orson would say, you know, get out of here. Who is this guy? But instead, Gary introduced me, and he was very gracious and said, why don't you help with the lights? So the next thing I knew, I was there. It was a scene with a car at night in what we call poor man's process, which is where you have the windows are sort of fogged, and you stand there with lights that go by like this, so that it looks as if auto headlights are going by. So I did one of those auto headlights, and I was being given instructions by Orson, you know, go a little faster, Curtis. Now wait a little bit. Now go by again, you know. And so it was very exciting to suddenly find myself on Orson's crew.
The great thing about Orson was the minute that he did recognize you, then you couldn't get away. It was like a love affair, because you wanted to be there for him, because he was the most wonderful person about complimenting you and making you feel like he appreciated what you did, and that you wanted to do more, and that he really understood how to get people to do the most for him, and in a good way. I mean, it was always wonderful. You wanted to do way beyond what you could do, or you thought you could do for Orson.
One of the things when you're making a movie with Orson Welles, Orson's in charge, and nobody talks. I mean, it's like on other sets where everybody's, where they have to yell for quiet, you know. Quiet, we're rehearsing, or quiet, we're shooting, or quiet, you know. On Orson's set, Orson's the only one that talks. Otherwise, all the crew, nobody talked to anybody. They're all busy doing stuff, you know, and everyone's working to get this thing made.
I always had a great working relationship with him. It was wonderful all the time when we were working on the movie. The only problem I ever had with him was over food. And it was a consistent thing that anytime we had to deal with food, whether it was what we were eating, what the crew was eating, what was in the house, or whatever, it was always a problem. Something that I would always get yelled at about. For example, we were working 7 days a week, and in the second period we were working 7 days a week, and the crew was working real hard, like 19, 20, 22 hours a day sometimes. And we had the two cooks that I had brought in from San Francisco cooking in the motel in their own room. They had a little stove, and they were cooking for 25, 30 people in this little hotel room, which was really causing a problem because there was so much, you know, they had to have the raw materials there and everything, but they were doing a great job. And they came to me this one Saturday and they said, you know, we have a really good idea. Everybody's working really hard, so why don't we have a special sort of brunch tomorrow, like Eggs Benedict? I said, that sounds great. Everybody will love that, and we'll have that. So the next day, and usually I would tell Orson what we're having, but somehow this didn't seem to be a problem with it. Everybody's going to like this. So the next day, sure enough, we serve Eggs Benedict. The crew loves it. They're all out around the pool. Everybody's, you know, raving about it and everything, and we're all sitting out there having a little break. It's about 11:30. And from inside the screen door in the kitchen, where the kitchen table was, where Orson was eating, I hear this, Frank! Frank! So I run in and I open the door and I say, yes, Orson, yes, Orson. And he says to me, what is this? And I look down and there's a plate of Eggs Benedict there. And I said, well, it's Eggs Benedict. It's for the guys, a little special brunch for the guys. They were working really hard and everything. He says, I know what it is. Is this for the crew? And I said, yes, we're all having it. It's really great, isn't it? He said, no, it's not. These men are working really hard and long hours. What they need is lumberjack food, not little bridge club old ladies food, lumberjack food. Get some beans and wieners and potatoes out here on the... I'm going, okay. So I go rushing out. I find the caterers who are relaxed and they've been cooking hollandaise sauce all morning and this whole thing. Can we get some lumberjack food in here? Well, of course, it turns out that Orson didn't like the food. It never was about him. It was about everybody. You know, he never was his problem. If there was something wrong, it had to be wrong for some other reason.
I had a scene where he'd rewritten this long list of very, very complicated names, and I couldn't memorize them that quickly. So I put them down under my feet on cards, and I was kind of looking up at Houston and down at the cards with the names. I figured Marlon Brando can do it, I can do it. So when this take was over, Orson said, Susan, where's Susan? I said, Orson, I'm right here. He said, Susan, where is she? Where is she? I said, Orson, and I went right up to her. I said, Orson, I'm here. He said, oh no, you couldn't possibly be Susan. She would never have acted that scene that badly. And it was bad. So I did it over. I threw away the cue cards and did it over. And strangely enough, I didn't take it personally. He did it with enough humor. I thought, well, he's right. It probably was no good. I wasn't all there.
I bet the biggest problem in acting in front of a camera probably is self-consciousness, nervousness, fear of failure, you know. But those things evaporated when you were with Orson because it didn't even come up. I mean, what he made me feel like was that I could do anything. Whatever I wanted to do would be fine. However I wanted to play it would be fine. And if he wanted to do it again, it wasn't because it wasn't brilliant. It was just that we tried a different way.
To me, Kazan was a great director. John Ford was a great director. But for an actor's actor, I would say Orson.
There was a lot of rehearsal time because also Orson's background was theater too, and he trusted his actors, which was nice, because you get hired a lot but not trusted. And he also was very open. You know, it's interesting that you think somebody who's genius or has that kind of intelligence would, and there are so many egomaniacs in this business, and God knows Orson had a big ego, but he was very open. If anyone gave him a wonderful idea, he was very flexible and open to it, which I think real artists are.
Oh, it was a very powerful scene. It was just Orson's dialogue and direction, and there's a close-up on me, but it was so vivid and so real. I think it was somebody like Edmund O'Brien or somebody else, and maybe it was an AD, and he said he hadn't finished the close-up. There were more lines. And I said, don't worry. He changed the angle. So in that scene in the bus, Zimmer must have had 5 different close-ups. Orson was a great actor's director. He would say, extend, extend. And in Hollywood, all the things I'd done, everyone was fast, fast, fast. Say the lines, go, go, go. Orson was just the opposite. And I think some of those lines were probably the best I've ever done in my life, because it took forever, which is what Orson wanted. But I was not used to that. Who could be? Another time, we were doing the scene in Bel Air. If you remember, it was the night of the full moon. And he had been lighting for like an hour, which was a long time for Orson. And they had me up on the roof of some building or house. And he had been up there before and gotten down, and Orson was a very big man. I was afraid to tell him what I saw. And he said, "Tell me, goddammit, Cameron, tell me what it is." I said, "Well, it's the moon." He said, "What? Where?" And somebody helped him, maybe 5 people, get up there. And he took a look. Now, I had suggested this to at least 10 directors before, because if you can see it with the eye, why can't you see it on film? On a bright, broad moonlight night in the desert, for example, you can see. And why shouldn't the camera see? I'll never forget. The only one who listened to me was Orson. He came up, took a look, we shot the whole sequence there by the light of the moon. That's Orson Welles.
He got inspired, and he grabbed the camera and put it on his shoulder and began to dance like Nureyev.
Well, Orson was, you know, a complete artist in a medium where most people aren't even half-baked artists, you know.
We were shooting a scene outside on a street, dead-end street, and Orson suddenly said, "Stop, stop, put that red stop sign right in the middle of the street." And someone said, "But Orson, it's right in the way." "Well, why do you want the stop sign there? What does it mean?" And he said, "It doesn't mean anything." He said, "But I know," he said, "that for years after, when people see this film, all the critics are going to be going on for days about the significance of this stop sign, and I will know it meant nothing."
And I said to Orson, "Orson, I think I could play a Jewish man," which I've done, you know, like in Command Decision. I played Goldberg. And I can play a Texan, but I mean, how do you... But it's remarkable. In the film, I look like a Jewish Texan.
So he loved the idea of taking a cinephile who would say things like, you know, "But do you consider the camera a phallus, Mr. Hannaford?" You know, that's Orson's favorite stuff. And he'd throw those kind of lines at me. "Ask him if it's a phallus. The camera's a phallus, you know. Ask it like with that voice."
There was an actor who was doing a scene up on the roof in Carefree, Arizona, and Orson at one point said to him, "Sway, I want you to sway violently back and forth, losing your balance." And the actor made the mistake of saying, "Orson, what's my motivation for swaying?" And Orson said, "Your motivation is that when I shot in Spain 4 years ago, there are 5 midgets who are holding you around the ankles up in the air. That's why you're swaying."
Yeah, one of my favorite scenes was the bathroom scene in there, where Orson had this set, so it's like here's the door of the bathroom. Inside is the bathroom with the mirror and the sink and everything and the toilet, and out here is the hall. And there was one scene where he was preparing to go to the screening of the movie, and he was in kind of sobering up, washing his face, and so it was like a stage set almost. Bogdanovich came, well, originally Rich Little, but then replaced by Bogdanovich, came and knocked on the door, and the scene was going on, split right down the middle of the scene. It was a great scene, and Huston in this scene was spectacular. Every once in a while he'd go, "Orson, what page are we on?" And Orson would go, "Well, John, what the hell difference does it make? I want to know how drunk I'm supposed to be." That one always killed me. I loved the two of them. Like, just got along so great. It was beautiful to watch the two of them work. These two great directors working together, and it was magnificent. And Huston goes over to Bogdanovich at one point and went, "So Peter, how many movies have you actually acted in now?" And Bogdanovich said, "Well, this is my second, Mr. Huston." He said, "2. Makes it easy to count." And everybody fell apart, you know. But it was stuff like that this camaraderie between the two of them. And Orson, although it was like one of the greatest treats I ever had to work with him and be with him and watch him and be around this, he never stopped yelling at people. Orson loved to have high drama around him at all times. It was like, I think one of his geniuses was capitalizing on mistakes. There'd be an accident, and Orson would Yes, okay, bring it in there, move that, do that, fix that, and he'd go with the accident, you know, and he capitalized on mistakes that would happen, and that's like his genius was like spontaneous. And yell at me? Huh. He never stopped. Orson constantly was yelling at everybody, and the only person I think I'd never heard him yell at was Mr. Houston. But it was always Peter, bring me that 2K. Run, do not walk. Run, do not walk was like our catchphrase.
You had to be prepared for anything. You might be asked to make a cocktail, build a set, act, write some dialogue, do some editing, run a camera. You know how to use? Oh yeah, you always had to say yes, though. That was the test. You always had to know how to do everything. And you know, he'd say, well, we need a scrim over here, and you say, well, will these do? And it might be the folding doors on the closet in the bedroom. I remember taking these folding lavalier doors off, and then he'd say, well, they're the wrong color. Oh, and then you'd paint it, and then you'd think, oh, now how am I going to get that back? And eventually, you know, you'd try and paint these doors to put them back on the closet. That didn't quite work.
That house was a mess after the second shoot.
It was a little bit of a problem.
It was in my name.
I still remember how beautifully he handled Edmund O'Brien. Poor Edmund was far gone. He had the baseball cap, the same, whatever he wore in the set, remember? And Edmund, who had been a great actor, at this time he was, you know, leaving this world, really, and he'd be all sorts of body noises, and Orson used it so beautifully. And he was fantastic. Edmund O'Brien was fantastic.
We made these cue cards for him, and poor Mr. O'Brien couldn't read them. So it didn't matter what you wrote. He was going to say whatever he wanted anyway. And it was always brilliant. He was that played the AD in the thing, and he had this bullhorn. It was always, you know, and it was just fabulous. And total professional, because whatever Orson asked him to do, he did. And Orson never asked him nicely. Orson always screamed at him. No, Eddie, and like he asked everybody. He just screamed and screamed at everybody. And on the last, and Edmund O'Brien, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. You know, so nicest living human, you know. And on the last day of Mr. O'Brien's work, he walked up, he says, well, that's it, Eddie, thank you very much, thank you. And Mr. O'Brien walked over and he said, Orson, thank you very much. Good working with you. And if you want to use me again in one of your pictures, you can contact my agent in care of Peking, China. And he walked off the set. He never objected to anything until the last, when it was totally in the can and finished. He wanted to let Orson know he was a little bit pissed off, you know. But oh man, I just loved being there. It was like that every day. Orson howled at it. That was the thing about Orson, you know. He was like, he had such a great, the whole thing was like Orson. I mean, it was like, the ego stopped at brilliance. Whenever he saw it, he loved it. And that was the thing.
We called up Mr. O'Brien and we said, we're coming over and you've got a plane in 2 hours so we could get him home that day. And he said, well, I haven't packed it. We said, we'll come help you pack. So Neil Canton and I rushed to this motel, and Mr. O'Brien was there, and he was sort of grumbling, and he hadn't packed one suitcase, and so we started helping him pack his stuff. And we were opening up the drawers and stuff in his room, and he had a lot of light bulbs and Scotch tape wrapped around him in these drawers, and a lot of weird stuff. And
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola, bananas.
And meat.
And meat that was just like out, but in the drawers with his clothes. So Neil and I tried not to pay any attention to this and just started packing this stuff. And we said, well, what would you like us to do with those light bulbs there? He said, well, put those in this airline bag. So we put them in an airline bag with some Scotch tape and a couple of other weird things, a couple of bananas things. And we rushed to the airport, and we're going, and we're running to the plane, and we've got him in a wheelchair, and we're taking him. We take him through, and we put the bags through the security thing, you know, and not thinking. And suddenly there's, sir, could you step over here? And they go, and they've taken the airline bag, and they're opening it up. And it's got all these light bulbs with Scotch tape on them, and it must have looked like a bomb or something, you know, with bananas wrapped on it. And they're going, well, what is this? And I'm going, well, I'm trying to explain that it belongs to this Mr. O'Brien, who's not paying any attention to this and everything. And finally, we talked our way through this and got him on the plane, but it was a pretty weird experience. And Orson was always riding in that convertible, the yellow convertible. So he always wanted that around because it was a great car for him to ride in with the top down and everything. So it was go find a drive-in movie theater that we can shoot in. So there happened to be one out on Sepulveda, right where Builder's Emporium used to be. And so I went and it looked fine, and you know, I saw how you could get in and everything, and I said, okay, let's just show up there. And of course, in those days, we never asked permission to do anything. So we drove in there one morning. It was like a dawn shot. We're always doing these dawn shots. So we drove in and we were shooting away and everything. And suddenly I looked around and there were the police coming in a car and driving in. So we ran over and said, Orson, turn around, turn around. So the police drove up and we all kind of started over. And of course, that was quite a while ago. And we were always using the alibi that we were from UCLA and that we were some film students out just making a little, you know, school film or a project, because we were shooting on 16 and it didn't look real official. And I remember I was there talking to this policeman and looking through the window, and just right behind the policeman in this big yellow car is Orson Welles sitting there with a cigar, kind of trying to look like you couldn't see him, and of course he's just filling this car. You know, if they had ever looked over there, they would have totally blown it. But they sort of bought our story and said, well, you know, here's the manager's number. You better call him and get permission. And
We had a crane in there.
and we did. We had one of those scissor lifts in there. We did have a few things that were a little bit over the top, but I think we got away with that one.
Time went by, and I would encounter Orson occasionally at the restaurant Ma Maison. And he, one day when I was there, I was on my way to the men's room, and I didn't want to bother him because he was there almost every day, and I only went there occasionally. I didn't want to bother him, but he saw me and he said, Curtis, come over here. So I went over to his table and he said, now Curtis, he said, when you come to this restaurant and you see me sitting here, I expect you to come over and say hello to me. It was there that I saw him for the last time. Sometime later, I was at the restaurant. I went over to say hello to him, and I remembered the exact conversation that we had, and it's kind of a nice way to remember him. I was very dressed up. I'd had some kind of an interview or something that day. And he looked up at me and he said, don't you look splendid? And I said, you look pretty splendid yourself, Orson. And those are the last words I ever said to him.
I was doing a guest shot on Silver Spoons, right, with Ricky Schroeder, and Gary Coleman was on this week, and we're in rehearsal. It's a 5-day rehearsal. You tape Friday night, and on Wednesday at about 10 o'clock, we're in the rehearsal room at Universal, and we're all rehearsing, and the phone rings, and the script girl goes over and answers the phone, and she goes, Peter Jason, it's for you. It's Orson Welles. And everyone in the room froze, including the director, who was like a longtime TV director, Mr. Shea, and they froze. And I kind of flushed and went, oh no, what does he want? And I went over and I said, hi, Orson. And he says, Peter, we need you. I said, Orson, I'm doing a job here. I'm getting paid. I mean, I'm acting here for money, and I'll be working all week. No, we need you now. I said, well, what are you doing? He said, well, we're down at the Variety Arts, downtown LA, and we're shooting this magician movie, and I need a heckler from the crowd. You're coming out of the crowd, you got a gun, you shoot the balloon, and Oya falls, right? I'm suspending her, and it's a trick, and we need you now. We're shooting it now. And I said, Orson, I'm in the middle of making money here. I'll be here all week long. No, Peter, you don't understand. We need you now. And I said, Orson, you don't understand. I'm being paid. I'm under contract here for this week. And he said, let me talk to your director. I said, no, Orson, you can't talk to the director. Give me the director. And I said, oh, God. I said, Mr. Shea, he'd like to talk to you for a second. And me? You know, and this guy, wow. Hello? Yes, Mr. Wells. Oh, I understand, Mr. Wells. Yes. Well, sure, we can work around him. Oh, yes. Well, okay, goodbye. And he says, Peter, he needs you. And I said, well, I know, but I'm working for you. No, we can work around you. He needs you now. And that's Orson Welles. And I went, I know. Should I go? You have to go. He needs you now. He needs you now. And I went, okay. And he said, Peter, before you go, when you go down there to do this thing for him, would you ask him for a cigar? And I said, a cigar? He said, yes, I'd like to have a souvenir, a cigar, one of Orson Welles' cigars. And I went, okay, I'll ask him, see you tomorrow. And I took off. I drove downtown. I went in. Orson's there doing what he loved to do, eat. He's there having lunch when I arrive. And no rush, Peter, we're eating. And you want some food? Here you go. And we're eating in this theater, the Variety Arts. And then he says, all right, now with a shot, I want you coming out of the balcony. You're coming down. You have a gun in your back. You're drunk. You're a heckler. And you're yelling, fake, phony, get off the stage. And shoot the gun. One of the bullets hits the balloon, and Oya, who is levitated, comes crashing to her feet come crashing to the stage. And then Orson, dressed as a magician, says not to the audience, no problem, folks, no problem. He's just a heckler. I will now make him disappear. And he says, he backs me up to the curtain, and the old trick, I get knocked on the head from behind the curtain, and they drag me underneath the curtain. Just one little simple scene. We did it. Took a couple hours, and I'm leaving, and I said, Orson, I promised this director that I'd bring him one of your cigars. And Orson said, what? One of my cigars? Never! No, never! And I said, Orson, he let me get out of work to come and work for you for free here, and the least you can do is give him a cigar. One of my cigars? Never! No, Peter, no, anything else but my cigar. Never! And I couldn't believe it, He's not going to give me a cigar? Can't believe it. Well, oh yeah, thanks, adios, I'll see you later. And I start walking up the aisle. Peter! Yes? Here, give him 2 of them. Tell him thank you. And he gave me 2 of his cigars, which I went back and gave to the man, and the guy probably has them in a glass case on his mantelpiece, I wish I could have had him sign them. But Orson was definitely an original and one of a kind. And you'd do anything for him, anything.
Working with Orson Welles was like going to a 15-year film school. I learned so much, and he made you learn. I mean, camera, sound, lighting, editing, everything. I couldn't have had a better teacher. And Orson was also a very generous man. He was hard on you. He was a taskmaster, and you had to work with Welles because he was hard on himself. But he couldn't help it. He just was driven to be creative, and he loved to make films. I'm lucky. I got to work with him.
It was the greatest experience in my theatrical career. In my 28 years of being an actor, it was the greatest time I ever had. It was also some of the toughest.
And people have asked me, well, why didn't you write this down? Why didn't you keep a diary? Well, I didn't because I never wanted to miss anything. I never wanted to be away from him because he was so wonderful to be around. And you could learn so much, and just be part of it was great.
It definitely was not Orson's ability to do something common or something, conventional.
I really am sorry for all the great things that he did that were never shown. And that's why I keep after you, Gary. I keep hoping The Other Side of the Wind will be released. Because everybody in the world was in that film, everybody.